once you submit your resume, once you submit your cover letter, when you sort of move on to that next phase, right, which is the actual interviewing phase, how would you suggest folks go about behavioral interview to begin with?
Yeah. So there's a behavioral interview part, and when the recruiter is interviewing a candidate, they're trying to answer two questions. First, because it's a client-facing role, first they want to know if they can put you in front of a client, and second, if you are a fun person to work with, because you're going to be working with this candidate almost 24/7 in one team. You want to make sure that he's a good team player. So they have these questions in mind when they're asking your behavioral questions. We lay down the list of the behavioral questions here. This is not an exhaustive list, though. There are some of the examples. I'm sure you've heard about the STAR format many, many times. This is something that is also applicable to consulting, so keep that in mind when preparing for the behavioral interviews.
Got it. I guess the next set of behavioral, the next set of interview after behavioral is the more interesting, meaty portion of a typical consulting interview, right? Which is the case study. A lot of candidates I know tend to, prep a lot for case study, and they try to treat it as the major portion of their interview. What are some of the, insights that you have?
It is indeed a very important part of the interview process in consulting. It is a skill. And in order to prepare for your case study, practice, practice, and practice. My suggestion would be to practice with many different people so that you get used to getting or answering the questions and getting the cases from a stranger. When you're given a case study from a recruiter, it's probably going to be a person that you have never met. So just to eliminate the level of stress, for you to be able to handle the conversation, practice with the strangers. It will give you that. Forgot the word, but it will help you to go through this experience. Ask for the feedback, and there is a specific consulting case framework for the feedback. What they're specifically evaluating against is your structure. How do you structure the business problem? There is an underlying principle, it's called a MICE principle, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. That's how you should structure your business problems. We will speak a little bit about it later today as well. They check on your business acumen. How well do you know the industries? How easily you can navigate? And if you don't have much knowledge about this specific industry, how can you draw analogy from a different industry and apply it to this one? Your quick math abilities. So case study will typically include some kind of calculations. You're not allowed to use a calculator, and you only have a pen and paper to use to come up with the solutions. Communication is one thing that is really important. So when you are given a case study interview, pretend that you're already a consultant and you're presenting in front of a client. So how would you go? How do you keep yourself professional? How do you handle the conversation? How do you drive the conversation? Those are all the things that are really important. I want to just highlight the recommendation part. At the end, you will be asked for the recommendation. Keep it concise. Make sure that it's really well structured as well. So give one recommendation, then list at least 3 next steps and 3 risks and 3 next steps. So, and as you practice, revisit the case studies that you have practiced and try to improve for the next one.
Got it. I think with all the structure that you've just given, probably it would be really useful to kind of jump into one sample case and see, how do you think about it, probably at that 30,000 foot level.
Yeah, so this is an example of the case study. I want to just mention this is a very easy one. So in a typical interview, you're probably going to have something more complex than this. but just to give you like a sense of what kind of case studies you can get, like what is it? So it's a business problem, and this is a business problem related to rafting business. So basically the interviewer is going to read the prompt. You're not going to have it in front of you. I can read it. So my friend Carlos wants to invest in a rafting business in California. In addition to the investment, he wants to work as a general manager of this business. And you are asked the following questions. Is the business currently profitable? How much is the business worth? And should Carlos acquire it? So just before we kind of jump into like solving this case, we're not going to solve all of it. We're just going to touch on the first question a little bit. So is this business currently profitable? So this is a question related to profits specifically. How would you think about profits? What is a profit? So profit is a difference between revenue and cost. And as we go to the next level, what is revenue? Revenue is and for this case specifically, how is the revenue formed for the rafting business? So we know if they're selling trips. So depending on the number of trips and the price per trip, that's how we're going to get the revenue. So it's number of trips times price per trip. Let's go about the cost side. What kind of costs we will have as rafting business? And we're going to have fixed cost and we're going to have a variable cost. And then this is the example of a McKinsey framework for solving for profitability specifically. This is again very high level one. In the ideal case environment, like case study, experience, interview, you will drill down deeper into each of these buckets. So under number of trips, you will think about what are the factors that affect the number of trips, right? How do you price every trip, like your pricing strategy? In the variable cost, what are the different components of variable cost? What are the different components of fixed cost? As you drill down, the interviewer will guide you towards where you should look for the root of the problem. And as you communicate, it is a conversation. So as you communicate with the interviewer, you will get a better idea, like which way you should go towards solving this case.
I think with cases like this, and as you mentioned previously, it seems like more practice is really the way to go in order to be able to build this skill. And I'm assuming you have like a list of resources or something that you used in order to really get better at this stuff.
Yeah, practicing is really important, and start as soon as you can. Target, like, solve at least 50 cases before you go into an actual interview. There are like a lot of resources to utilize. Here are some of them. So within your business school, you should probably have a consulting club, but if you don't, check out the case books. We added the link here. So in this first link, you will have access to the case books developed by multiple business schools. Those have examples of the cases. Don't read them by yourself. Give them to your peers to choose and give the case to you. Then before you and while you prepare, I think it will be really useful to read the books that are related to solving cases. I found Case in Point really helpful. It has a lot of good frameworks to look into and kind of frames your thinking in terms of like how do you structure the business problems. One thing that I also found helpful is YouTube channels related to the case interviews. You can just search management consulting interview or case interview, and you will see a number of examples how how the best case interview looks like. And it has a pretty good examples with they even lay down the structure on the screen for you, so it's pretty useful.